Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Hines with Saddle Stitch Consulting. I'm a responsible technology strategist, and I help teams gain competitive advantage with solutions that put people first. I wanted to share with you some insights that I have been sharing with my own clients who've been asking me to help them integrate AI tools into their workflows. Super popular question these days. A lot of teams I'm working with are being asked to incorporate tools like ChatGPT or Copilot into their work, but they have some hesitation. And one of the biggest areas of concern they have is around their data security and privacy. They're afraid because they might not know what they're allowed to share, for starters, or if they do share something, what happens to that data and those conversations once they put their information into a chatbot. These are great questions. I'm really glad that people are asking them. But like with most things, the answer to what happens to your data isn't very simple or straightforward. It's kind of complicated. So I wanted to help demystify this for you if you're using Chat GPT or tools like that, just as an example. But before I get started, just want to make a few notes. If your employer provides a paid enterprise license for you to use it. You'll generally have better protections by default. Your chats won't be shared to retrain the models. Your administrators can manage access and all of that kind of stuff. Much of what we're going to talk about today is for individual, not enterprise users, but it's still good information so that you have better awareness of how these tools work. For you individual users, be sure to check what kind of account you have. Paid plans can have different terms or defaults than free plans, for example. Also, I'm not picking on OpenAI or ChatGPT here. I just chose it because it's the most popular tool, pretty much. I'm not saying it's an anomaly in any way or its privacy terms are better or worse than others. You can decide for yourself what you think of it. I'm also not trying to freak anyone out about their data and privacy so that they don't use these tools. It's very much the opposite. I want you to know what questions to ask, what settings to adjust, and what responsibilities you have so that you can feel much more confident about how you use these tools and get the most out of them without getting yourself or your employers into trouble. Finally, if you're using this for your work, whatever your employer's policies are, supersede anything I'm going to tell you. Do what they say, abide by their data governance, AI governance, and legal requirements. So with that, let's get into it. So the first thing I want you to do is think about your data and privacy as one big ecosystem. One part of that ecosystem is the data that you put into it, and the metadata, which is really just data about your data that you might be sharing. In the case of a chatbot, there's a lot of different things that you're sharing when you engage in a chat that you might not realize. So for example, you have the chat itself, which is pretty straightforward. You also are sharing some account data. If you sign in using a social login like Google, for example, you're sharing probably your profile photo, your email address, and perhaps other information. Also, if you build out your profile and your preferences in these tools, that information is associated with you. If you're using things like speech to text or engaging with voice in some way, you want to check to see how your voice data is being captured and stored. For those of you who use features like you might hear this called RAG or simply inputting documents that your chatbot can reference, it might be policies from your work or particularly important articles. Those pieces of data are other things that you are sharing. And you might also be sharing images of some kind. So just think about not just your chats, but all of the other stuff that you might be inputting along with those chats. So the next thing I want you to think about is once your data gets put into the chatbot, there are lots of ways that it can potentially seep out. And some of these might be ways that you're not expecting or that could be surprising to you. And this could be driven by lots of things. It could be the way that you have your permissions and settings set up, or it could be other tools the chatbot is connected to. And maybe there's bad actors who are trying to get at your data. So you just want to be mindful of the fact that once your data is in there, you want to make sure that you are doing everything that's in your control to be able to lock that data down in a way that you're comfortable with. And third, you can think about all the different people or entities that might ultimately consume your data with or without your consent. So just something to bear in mind that often these companies have human reviewers that part of quality control might be looking at your chats. Of course, lawyers and regulators can access this information as needed under certain circumstances. If you're not careful with how you share your data, competitors, other users might be able to get information about your organization, your IP, things of that nature. If you are not careful about adjusting your settings to determine whether or not you're going to share your data with the provider to retrain its data and become part of the data set, then your data might be leaking in that way. And of course, there's always the risk of bad actors out there. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we all know that sometimes it does. So for each of these parts of the ecosystem that we've just talked about, inputs and metadata, the chatbot itself and how it's set up, and any potential viewers, there are questions that you can ask yourself that correspond to each of those pieces that can help you think through how you want to manage your data. So the first question you can ask yourself about your inputs is, what kind of data am I sharing? Again, it's not just what you're putting into the chat box. We will talk about all of the other pieces of data and I'll show you examples, but just bear in mind, there's a lot of different data that you're sharing. The chatbot itself, what's the digital context? How is this chatbot connected to other services? You want to bear in mind where it's connected so that you have an understanding of what other entities could be able to access your data. And then finally, when it comes to potential viewers, we also want to think about who could be harmed. It could be you, it could be your organization, it could be information about a person. If you're putting, let's say, personally identifiable information into the system, that could be exposing someone else's data in a way that's harmful to them. So I think if you go through this thought exercise, ask yourself these 3 questions, they're really going to help you anticipate ways that your privacy could be impacted and also allow you to take control. All right, now let's take a look at a tool. In this case, we're going to look at ChatGPT. Again, I'm just using it for as an example. It's not necessarily exceptionally good or bad in terms of privacy, but a lot of these chatbots have similar features, so you can look for these across whatever your tool of choice is. The other piece of advice I would give you is to be that person like me who reads the fine print, who clicks on the learn more buttons so that you can really tell with a higher degree of accuracy what pieces of data are shared and how. So let me just sort of walk you through the interface here and give you some pointers on where to look within ChatGPT to be better stewards of your own information. So the first thing that you want to do is look at your profile. In this case, in the bottom left corner, I'm just clicking on my name here and I'm seeing this menu. I'm going to click on settings. Under settings, this is where you can take control of a lot of different aspects of your experience. We're going to look at personalization. And we are going to look at the choices we have here. So we learned we can enable customization and customize how ChatGPT responds to you. So you can turn that on or off. And when we click on the Learn More button, this is where you will see reference to custom instructions. Custom instructions are awesome. They really do give the chatbot context that is going to make results more relevant to you. But as with anything else, that means revealing information about your preferences and maybe personal data. So you just want to be cognizant of what it is that you're putting in there and how it's used. So a couple of notes on that point. If you use third-party plugins, the model may provide those developers with information from your instructions. And OpenAI also says information from your use of custom instructions could be used to improve model performance, like teaching the model how to adapt its responses to your instructions without overdoing it. I don't know exactly what that means, and I have failed to be able to find that in the privacy terms. So if anyone knows the answer to exactly what kind of information gets shared, do put it in the comments, but something to note. Okay, so we just talked about custom instructions. So what exactly are they? You can see here that there is a field labeled custom instructions. This is where you can tell the chatbot, things about your preferences, the tone you want it to adopt. You can also use this drop down to select a particular personality if you choose. You can tell it what the chatbot should call you, your occupation, something about your interest, your preferences, your maybe use this to create recipes, things of that nature. But again, this is information about yourself. So just think twice about what you put in here and the trade-off between relevance and accuracy in your chat outputs versus your own preference. The other thing that I want to point out, we scroll down a little bit further, this is where we learn about memory. So what exactly is memory? So again, clicking on these little buttons, these learn more icons, these will be your friends. And if you do that, you're going to go to a page that talks more about it. And memory, you will learn, comes in 2 forms. You will have reference saved memories. These are details you've explicitly asked ChatGPT to remember, like your name, favorite color. We just looked at some ways in which you can do that. And then also ChatGPT can reference your chat history. So even if you're engaging in one chat, it might reference previous chats to help, again, make those results more relevant to you. And it kind of learns something about you and what it is that you like, what a good answer is. And so it may reference previous chats if you have that turned on. As it says, these memories and these settings are flexible and you can change them. So where do you do that? Again, if we go back to ChatGPT, this is where you can manage your memories. You can see what it is that ChatGPT knows about you, and you can delete that information should you choose. Now, I don't have anything to show in here, but this is where you would find that information. Also, here's a little note. This is sort of in the category of fine print. You will see that ChatGPT may use memory to personalize your. So for these chatbots to go out to the open internet and reference up-to-date information is a huge value add. It makes your results more current and relevant. However, note that ChatGPT may use some of your memory to get those accurate and more relevant results. So let's take a look at what that means for you. And specifically, what I want to call out here is that what OpenAI is saying is that it may do a web search on your behalf. and it may collect general location information based on your IP address, and it might share that location with the third party. So if you're looking for good restaurants near you, for example, it's going to draw on that information to give you relevant results. And so therefore, it might rewrite your prompt into the search query using that information. So to learn more about that, you're going to want to defer to these search engines' privacy policies. If you have that memory enabled, when ChatGPT rewrites your search, it may also leverage relevant information from those memories to make the query better. Again, this is where leakage can happen if you're not vigilant. You might not mind this, but it's your choice to make. If you should choose to want to opt out of the chatbot's ability to reference internet information under the advanced setting here, you can find a toggle to disallow ChatGPT to automatically search the web for answers. Let's now look at another section of this menu called data controls. This is another one you're going to want to pay attention to. And I think people are becoming more and more aware that unless they tell these chatbots otherwise, often by default, their chat histories will become part of the training data for the next iteration of these large foundation models. So if you don't want your data to be shared back to the provider, then this is where you can make that choice. And there's more details here. Don't forget to click on learn more if you're curious, but that is where you'll find that setting. There are other abilities to share chats, archive chats. If you do share chat links, I don't have any active at this time, but you can deactivate those links after a period of time after they're relevant, which is probably a good practice. Additionally, a little while ago, OpenAI got a little bit of scrutiny for allowing people to include their shared link chats with the Google search engine. Some people did opt into that. It was an opt-in, but it wasn't entirely clear what that was doing and the potential security risk there. So just be vigilant, read the detailed information in the terms, and you should be a lot more empowered to control your data. There are a number of other settings that you'll find as you go along and you increase your use and depth of use of these tools. So if you are looking to create GPTs or use GPTs or create your own custom projects, just be sure to read about what happens to your data in those scenarios so that you're aware. But I want to point out a couple of things specific to ChatGPT that you should be mindful of. One of those little notes here is if you reference OpenAI's page on how your data is used to improve model performance, you'll see a note here that even if you've opted out of training, so remember that toggle that we don't want to share back our information to the training data set, even if you've opted out of that, if you choose to provide feedback, and this can be in the form of that thumbs up or thumbs down that you see at the end of your chats, that's considered a form of feedback to OpenAI, and they're going to take that entire chat conversation and use that to train their models. So that's a little bit of a loophole. Again, just be aware that that could happen. And then finally, again, specific to OpenAI, as you may or may not know, they have been sued by the New York Times. And because of that lawsuit, the New York Times has said, we are forcing you through the courts to retain all user content indefinitely going forward, just in case there is information pertinent to the case. So what does that mean for you? Well, if you have these particular kinds of accounts, it means that your chats are not being deleted after the standard 30 days, which is typical for most chatbots and was the case for ChatGPT, but it is in fact being saved indefinitely until this matter is resolved. Now, this does not impact enterprise or EDU customers. So again, you really need to know what kind of plan you're on. And if you have an employer who is providing access, use that tool. But just a couple of things to be aware of. Okay, so where does all of this information leave us? Hopefully it doesn't leave you scared to put any information in ChatGPT. That really wasn't the point. But hopefully you now know what questions to ask and how to think about your data in a more sophisticated way to look out for yourself and your organization. I'm going to share with you a few privacy rules of thumb. Just a disclosure here that this list came from Claude, which is the chatbot that I tend to prefer. I did review the results. It's generally pretty good information. Again, just rules of thumb about things that you should be more mindful of as you engage with these tools. So the first here being, higher risk information is really anything that would draw legal or regulatory scrutiny. Different industries have different, standards in that regard. So you want to be familiar with those, talk to your security folks, your legal folks. Anything that has personally identifiable information is also something I would caution you not to put into a chatbot. Medium risk categories of information include maybe things about your general operations, general financial trends, nothing that's extremely specific, but might give competitors a little bit of an advantage or insight into how you're running your business, and you may want to avoid that. And then the lower risk categories of information are things like if you're talking about general business questions, seeking advice, planning educational and training content, which I do a lot, doing any kind of competitor research based on information out there on the web. Those things are all pretty low risk, so you can proceed and generally feel pretty good about that. Questions to ask yourself, is this personal, financial, legal data of any kind? Would my competitors find this valuable? Would it give them a leg up? Is this restricted information or is it confidential within, my company? Here again is where your data governance comes into play. Your company may have very specific criteria, and could disclosing any of this information harm the company, its employees, or even just make the people who, I'm trying to serve, feel uncomfortable. So those are all things that you have to take into account using your own kind of common sense knowledge of your space and different policies. So with that, I hope that you will proceed with a bit more confidence, perhaps a bit more scrutiny when it comes to how you share your information. But if you need any help with any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to assist. Have a great day, everyone.